Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Sandy Smith, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Captain Michelle de Frisbom. Today marks the 83rd anniversary of the sinking of the Japanese merchant vessel Montevideo Maru. When Rabaul fell to the Japanese in January 1942, more than 1,400 members of the Australia's Lark Force were captured. Some 160 were killed shortly after surrender. Later that year, on the 22nd of June, approximately 850 prisoners of war and 200 civilian internees were ordered by their Japanese captors to board the vessel Montevideo Maru. The ship then sailed for the Japanese base on Hainan Island, keeping to the east of the Philippines to avoid Allied submarines. 8 days into the voyage, the Montevideo Maru was spotted by the American submarine USS Sturgeon. Unaware of the ship's cargo, Sturgeon manoeuvred into position and fired its torpedoes. According to both Sturgeon's logs and accounts of Japanese survivors, the Montevideo Maru sank by the stern in roughly 11 minutes. Although the crew was ordered to abandon ship, they apparently made no attempt to release the prisoners. The loss of the Montevideo Maru remains Australia's worst maritime disaster. The ship was carrying more than 1,050 Australian prisoners, none of whom survived the sinking. On the 18th of April 2023, the wreck of the Montevideo Maru was finally found. Cooperating with the Rabaul and Montevideo Maru Society and the Department of Defence, a team from the Silent World Foundation, with the aid of a Dutch deep-sea survey specialist, Frugro, found the wreck. It lay at a depth of over 4,000 metres in the South China Sea off the northwest coast of the Philippine island of Luzon. This discovery has hopefully brought some closure to the families of those lost on that fateful day 83 years ago. Today, we remember all those who were lost in the Montevideo Maru and whose names are recorded here on the Roll of Honour. We warmly welcome the family of Gunner George Christopher Harrington, who was a prisoner aboard the Montevideo Maru, whose story will be told shortly. We also warmly welcome Andrea Williams, President of the Papua New Guinea Association of Australia and Chair of the Rabaul and Montevideo Maru Group, Michael White, Treasurer of the New Guinea Volunteer Rifles and Papua New Guinea Volunteer Rifle Ex-Members Association, and John and Caroline Reeves, representing the Rabaul Historical Society, and the international delegation representing the Defence Cooperation Scholarship Program. As always, we welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We warmly welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by family and visitors to the memorial. If you are able, I now invite you to please stand and join in singing the national anthem.
For we are one and free.
The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Gunner George Christopher Harrington. George Harrington was born in Sydney on the 14th of April 1920, the son of Archie and Alice Harrington. The Harrington family were well established in Hornsby, where the family orchard, the Valley, was located. George grew up in Hornsby, surrounded by a large family. He attended Asquith Primary School and went on to work as a painter. George Harrington also served in the local militia unit, parading part-time with the 18th Battalion until he was mobilised for service on the 30th of April 1941 at the age of 21. After a period of initial training, Harrington embarked from Sydney on the troops ship Neptuna on the 6th of August 1941, bound for Rabaul. Located on the island of New Britain, Rabaul was the capital and administrative centre of the Australian-mandated territory of New Guinea. With a ring of active volcanoes, Rabaul was strategically important for its airfields and natural harbour. For Japan, these were seen as key for its advance into the Southwest Pacific. With the outbreak of war with Japan in December 1941, members of the 2nd 22nd Australian Infantry Battalion had begun arriving at Rabaul in March and April. They were joined by a detachment of the New Guinea Volunteer Rifles, a detachment of the 2nd 10th Field Ambulance, and gun crews and batteries, including Gunner George Harrington, who had been allocated to an anti-aircraft battery. Known as Lark Force, its role was to protect nearby airfields and the seaplane base at Rabaul, and to provide early warning of Japanese movements through the islands to Australia's north. Despite being ill-equipped, the men spent the following months constructing defences and training for operation in a tropical environment. Gunner Harrington was hospitalised with appendicitis in late November. He was back in action shortly after Christmas that year. Japanese bombing of New Britain began early the following year and increased in intensity. By the morning of the 22nd of January 1942, Number 24 Squadron had been virtually destroyed and its 3 remaining aircraft were withdrawn. With the airstrips no longer needed, they were destroyed, and Lark Force withdrew from Rabaul and waited on the western shores of Blanche Bay for the inevitable Japanese landings. These began after midnight. By 9 a.m, communication failures and overwhelming Japanese strength had destroyed the cohesion of the Australian defence. It is estimated that against the original garrison of 1,400, the Japanese landed 17,000 men in the immediate vicinity of Rabaul. Lark Force Commander Colonel John Scanlon ordered a withdrawal on the basis of every man for himself. Unprepared for retreat, chaos ensued and Lark Force disintegrated. Over the following days, groups of men, ranging from company strength to pairs and individuals, sought to escape along New Britain's north and south coasts. Some found small boats, while others were picked up by larger vessels operating from New Guinea. Around 400 members of Lark Force managed to return to Australia. About 160 Australians captured by the Japanese while trying to escape were massacred at Toll Plantation. Gunner George Harrington was among the 836 survivors who were captured and interned as prisoners of war. In his last letter home, written in late March 1942, Harrington reported being in hospital with a touch of malaria, but doing fine, and I am being treated fine. I am under the Japanese here and they are treating us real well and we get plenty to eat and sometimes too much, and they do all they can for us and I appreciate it very much indeed. How well Harrington was really doing remains in question. Regardless, a few months later, he was among the group of approximately 850 military prisoners and 200 civilian internees who were ordered to board the merchant ship Montevideo Maru on the morning of the 22nd of June. The worst and most dangerous period in a prisoner's life was travelling in captivity. Overcrowding, sickness, disease, and the dangers posed by Allied submarines caused stress and anxiety. Conditions on board the Japanese hell ships were severe. Over 1,000 prisoners might be crammed into spaces suitable for 100, and they were given little food, fresh water, or adequate sanitation facilities. 8 days into its voyage to Hainan Island, the Montevideo Maru was spotted by the American submarine USS Sturgeon, which manoeuvred into position to fire its stern torpedoes. Survivors from Montevideo Maru's Japanese crew reported 2 torpedoes striking the vessel, followed by an explosion in the oil tank on the aft hold. The vessel sank in as little as 11 minutes. Of those aboard, barely 20 Japanese crew survived. More than 1,000 others died. According to a surviving Japanese crewman, Australians in the water sang Auld Lang Syne to their trapped mates as the ship sank beneath the waves. The sinking is considered the worst maritime disaster in Australia's history. Unaware of the ship's loss, the families of those on the Montevideo Maru continued to send letters in the belief that their loved ones were being held as prisoners of war. It was not until after the war that they discovered the fate of those lost on the Montevideo Maru. Among the dead was George Christopher Harrington, who was 22 years old. Today he is commemorated on the Rabaul Memorial at the Montevideo Maru Memorial in Ballarat and the Rabaul and Montevideo Maru Memorial here at the Australian War Memorial. Harrington's name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Gunner George Christopher Harrington, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of our director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.